Did you know that Gangplank died? Seriously, you couldn't play him. Reason being, he was dead, but we'll get back to that. First off, did you know Gangplank used to eat oranges? Wait, he still does. But did you know his Q is like a ranged basic attack? Oh, that's the same, kinda. So what was different about the original Gangplank compared to now? Ah, barrels. And before he, well... let's just look at Gangplank before the rework. Old Gangplank will appear very similar, but with an unmistakably stark contrast both in tone and kind of in his kit. In general, most of his abilities received mostly minor changes, but they might add up to make a different feeling champion in some ways. And of course, very different feelings with barrels. Let's start with Gangplank's old passive, Grog-Soaked Blade. Gangplank's basic attacks dealt 4 to 21 magic damage per second and slowed his target by 7% for 3 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So it had a potential on-hit effect of 12 to 63 damage per second and 21% slow. I feel like we're really missing something, so I'd like to go back to what on earth Gangplank even is or was, or give him some sort of class. Classes were less strict than they are now. Many juggernauts in modern League of Legends, for example, have very similar kits that make them juggernauts without a doubt. Mordekaiser is jokingly called AP Darius probably more often than I think, yet Gangplank could have been described as a melee carry back in the day, which quite simply meant melee AD carry in a time where the term marksman had yet to be officially given to what were known as ADCs, like Ashe and Tristana. Melee AD carry probably meant different things to different people, but from what I knew and heard, melee carries meant champions like Master Yi, Tryndamere, Old Fiora, and at a slight stretch, Old Gangplank. Champions like Jax, Olaf, and Old Aatrox may have been considered melee carries, but they were more often attributed to be bruisers due to their CC abilities and bulkier builds. Melee AD carries had a high affinity for auto attacks and all of the stats that affect it. They had some form of defensive ability like Yi's Meditate or Fiora's Riposte, some form of steroid ability like Tryndamere's Q and Yi's Wuju style, usually 1 or 2 ways of closing the gap like Tryndamere's E-Spin and W Slow, Yi's Alpha Strike and Highlander movement speed, and Fiora's 2 Qs and Blade Waltz, as well as a way to drop aggro like Yi's Alpha Strike and Tryndamere's ultimates. But what about Gangplank? He was certainly an outlier among these and overlaps a bit with supports and even mages to an extent. Let's carry on. Gangplank's old Q was...
Gangplank's old Q was Parley.
Thank you. Which shot at a target enemy, applying physical damage, 100% AD, on-hit effects including his passive and sheen effects, and could critically strike. If the ability killed the target, Gangplank gained between 4 to 8 gold based on ability level, and refunded half the mana cost. Gangplank's old W was Remove Scurvy, where he ate an orange and became okay. Removing all crowd control, and healing for 80 to 360 health, scaling with 100% AP. We'll get back to that, don't worry. Gangplank's old E was Raise Morale. Rather than throw barrels on the floor, Gangplank passively gained bonus attack damage and movement speed, between 8 to 16 AD and 3 to 7% movement speed based on level. Using the E active disabled the passive, but granted larger buffs to AD and movement speed, and granted half of that to nearby allies for 7 seconds. The active buffs were 12 to 40 bonus AD and 8 to 20% bonus movement speed. It was no Highlander, but it classified as a steroid, and that W orange was a pretty powerful defensive ability. It didn't necessarily drop aggro, but it may have dissuaded enemies from using CC abilities on Gangplank in the first place, and his high innate movement speed on E gave him decent mobility, too much of which was less necessary for Gangplank compared to other melee carries since he had a 625 range Q ability to basically auto-attack from a distance, on a short cooldown. Finally, Gangplank's old ultimate was Cannon Barrage, raining fire upon a target area, dealing 75 to 165 magic damage every second, scaling with 20% AP per second, granting vision of the area and slowing all enemies inside by 25%. Now, that's the last version of the ultimate before Gangplank's visual and gameplay rework. Actually, before patch 4.18, Gangplank's ultimate did damage randomly within the area and at random intervals, so you could have gotten lucky or unlucky with it back then. With Raise Morale granting speed and Cannon Barrage slowing enemies, Gangplank was a great leader, even if he wasn't necessarily Malphite's levels of initiation. Beyond that, he was pressing Q on people, then walking in to slap his enemies with Grog, continuing his assault through CC via eating an orange. Most of Gangplank was focused on his Q, and with that came an obvious item synergy: Sheen. Back then, you usually had up to 3 options: Trinity Force, a little later Iceborne Gauntlet, and also Lichbane. We'll get to that. Old versions of Trinity Force had critical strike chance, which would have worked nicely with Gangplank, and he'd even benefit a little off of that AP that Trinity Force used to have way back in the day, and since patch 3.10a, with its 200% base AD ratio on the Sheen passive, it has always been a powerful item spike for Gangplank. With Q's ability to crit came a synergy with Energize items, particularly the first of them, Static Shiv. It gave Gangplank some wave clear with AoE magic damage, as well as attack speed and crit to use with his E steroid. Additional AD and crit made Gangplank's Q a very scary weapon, but although 625 range is great in laning phase, late game teamfighting was a bit too intimidating for him to walk up and poke with it freely, even with his W safety orange. Building too squishy and concentrating on Q would make him insanely powerful, but basically Yi with a gun and building not enough damage would make him, well, not even half a Yi, but he made up for that with his stat boosting aura on E and great power of his ultimate. He also got his item spikes faster than other champions thanks to the bonus gold from
Parlay.
Thank you again. So there were many funny builds and iterations Gangplank could take. Focus on money with gold per 10-second runes and items, your Bankplank. Go jungle, your Gangplank. Opt for Iceborne Gauntlet instead of Trinity Force, you may well be a Tank Plank. But one of these alternative builds stands out more than the rest, and though it doesn't fit this naming convention, it is without a doubt the most notable and funny.
APGPOP. AP Gangplank rushes a Lichbane to fire off magic damage into the enemy with his golden desert eagle.
When you build Lichbane on Gangplank, your Q now has an AP ratio. After patch 4.4, Lichbane had an AP ratio of 50%, and prior to that, it had 75%. Both times, Gangplank was pretty good with it, sort of. Beyond that, his E didn't actually scale with anything other than level, so its utility and self buff are unchanged. And his W's 100% AP ratio was what made it the most entertaining.
My name is Optimus Prime, and my home planet was destroyed by the overpoweredness that is APGP.
And though maxing W was simply unheard of, APGP made maxing W his business, probably second, but I wouldn't be surprised to see one max it first. His ultimate's 20% AP damage per second worked too, allowing him to steal kills from across the map, probably stacking a Magi Soul Stealer as well. The Sheen build path towards Lichbane and the latter's AP ratio kept the ability relevant, and though it wasn't critting for entire health bars, it still hurts. And you can't hurt the Gangplank, as AP Gangplank's oranges are most certainly in season. But one of the greatest themes for champion design and rework design as well at the time was skill expression and counterplay. Gangplank offered very little in counterplay, with his Q doing pretty much non-negotiable damage and applying a dot every few seconds in lane, and his E gave a stat stick to slap his opponents with, so something had to change. But how? We know the answer.
Barrel!
Gangplank was reworked on July 22nd, 2015 on patch 5.14, peeling oranges and deploying barrels. The patch released him alongside a gameplay update for Misfortune, changing ARAM to Butcher's Bridge and introducing a new mode called Black Market Brawlers, which unfortunately would never come back. Amid all this celebration, sometime between the 22nd and 30th of that month, Gangplank died. This isn't made up. You could not play as Gangplank for this period of time. Misfortune killed him. Gangplank sank with his ship and perished. But he's here today, so we know he would come back. Though instead of the original splash art he was released with, he came back with a new one and a new skin. A Gangplank who has been to hell and back with a vengeance. The old skin was given to players for free at the time, now named Captain Gangplank. Both in visuals and voice lines, it's a pretty clear and contrasting before and after Gangplank's misfortune between the two skins.
A blade in the gut solves most problems. A turned back deserves a knife. My ship is my soul. I lost my ship, but not my soul.
The patch also came with a new announcer, Gangplank.
Welcome to Summoner's Rift. Welcome to the Howling Abyss. Welcome to Bilgewater. You have slain an enemy. Pentakill! Legendary kill! They'll think twice next time. Welcome to the Twisted Tree Line.
And like most good things Riot do, this would never be heard again. But what changed about Gangplank? Well,
Barrel!
Gangplank's new passive is Trial by Fire, periodically empowering his next auto attack, not his Q, with fire, setting the target enemy alight to deal 55 to 310 plus 100% bonus AD, bonus true damage over 2.5 seconds. As of very recently, it increases by up to 200 extra damage based on critical strike chance as well. It can also affect turrets, but at only half effectiveness. When Gangplank lights an enemy on fire, he gains 15 to 30% bonus move speed for 2 seconds. If he detonates a barrel, Trial by Fire resets and he also gains the same movement speed. Gangplank's new Q is
Parley. Yarr.
Thank you again. Gangplank shoots the target with the same range, 100% total AD ratio, same as before, but now it does slightly less base damage early but more late, and has a slightly lower cooldown. It no longer applies Gangplank's passive, meaning he has a good reason to get up close, and it does give 1 less gold than before when killing a unit, but now is capable of getting 4 to 8 silver serpents, a currency unique to Gangplank that he can spend to upgrade his ultimate. His W is near enough the same, but now with a missing health ratio and only 90% AP scaling. His E is completely changed out for Powder Keg. Gangplank stores charges of barrels that he can place that have 3 health and lose 1 health down to a minimum of 1 over time. All basic attacks and Qs from Gangplank and his enemies deal 1 damage to the barrel, and if Gangplank lands the last hit on the barrel, it explodes, dealing the same damage as the attack that triggered it, and bonus damage to champions. The barrel damage additionally ignores 40% of the enemy's armor. It used to ignore 60%, and that was kind of insane. If the triggering attack was a crit, the barrel explosion deals 10% more damage in addition to the critical damage bonus. If an enemy last hits the barrel, it is safely defused, granting a little gold to the defusing player. Barrels within range of each other can detonate in sequence, causing a chain of explosions. Though they cannot overlap their damage on the same target, this can cause a massive AoE of critical damage and extend Gangplank's range. Before we talk more about barrels, let's quickly talk about his ultimate. His ultimate now only scales with 10% AP per wave, but it lasts for 8 seconds, up from the original 7, and cools down 3 waves per volley, leading to a total magic damage of 480 to 1200, scaling with 120% AP, supposing an enemy stands on it for the entire 8-second duration. More importantly, the ultimate now can be upgraded with 500 silver serpents at the shop. The Death's Daughter upgrade sends a large cannonball to the center of the ultimate for 120 to 300 true damage, scaling with 30% AP. Fire at Will adds 6 additional waves over the 8 seconds, essentially increasing the fire rate and DPS of the ultimate, changing the total magic damage to 720 to 1800 plus 180% AP. Finally, the appropriately named Raise Morale upgrade causes Gangplank and all allies within the ultimate area to gain 30% bonus movement speed, lingering for 2 seconds. Not much of Gangplank changed, but it's clear to see what changed. His passive no longer stacks up to 3 times without a cooldown, and now is a very powerful true damage ability, with a cooldown that isn't limited by being applicable by Q. It encourages Gangplank to get into melee range, whereas before he basically did so if he was bored. The old E may be gone, but he gains movement speed from triggering barrels, his main mechanic, and also gets Raise Morale in his ultimate upgrade. So now, Gangplank still has the same Q range, but makes a choice between harassing his opponent or farming with Q and barrels. When Q is used to detonate a barrel, any units killed in the explosion will grant the bonus gold and silver serpents that Q provides. Runes like Kleptomancy, when they were available, made this choice almost trivial, however. Gangplank's Q is like a ranged auto attack with a little bonus damage on its own. Its ability to apply sheen effects like Trinity Force and now Essence Reaver make it a deadly harass tool, and using barrels to ignore armor and apply bonus damage is more than enough to turn the tide of any fight. The slow and move speed granted also help Gangplank close in to use his new and improved passive, And of course, face any CC head-on with his fruit of choice. Barrel traps are fairly self-explanatory, but barrel tricks to use in the midst of a fight are much harder to pull off and so much more rewarding. For example, the timing needed to chain 2 barrels freshly placed, rather than lying in wait in a trap linking 3 of them, is quite precise. A quick trick to getting it is to use Q outside of its range, then place the barrel as soon as the Q animation starts, queuing it up as soon as possible. The range isn't super amazing, but it's longer than you can normally get. Though it is a rather funny mini-game, the skill ceiling and amount of skill expression now available to Gangplank is astounding. I was convinced that maybe Gangplank's Q had a reduced range post-rework, but apparently this isn't the case, and so there isn't much to miss about old Gangplank, except maybe his personality. Old League was very, well, funny. Fiddlesticks, Gangplank and Warwick are all champions that were funnier before, whether intentional or not. Now they all have deep backstories filled with horror or tragedy and personalities to reflect that. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. But to some people, it might not be what they signed up for many years ago. But now, I have to throw it over to you. What do you think of Gangplank before and after his rework? What do you think of Gangplank's rework release and the Bilgewater event where he died? And should we get more champion announcers like Gangplank, and would you buy a Gangplank announcer or any other champion for RP? Please let me know in the comments below. Shoutouts to the members OKJ, Nashborn, Awesome Toyota, Light, AJGBeat91, Ash Ketchum, War Squid, Genocide, and Ultimate Ground for supporting the channel. Thank you again so much. See you next time.